During the midst of the Irish War of Independence, in August 1920, Terence MacSwiney, Republican activist and Lord Mayor of Cork, was arrested by British troops, whilst also being tried and sentenced to 2 years in jail. His response to this treatment was swift. He defiantly told his court-martials, "I have decided my term of imprisonment. I shall be free, dead or alive, within a month." MacSwiney decided to protest his internment by embarking on a hunger strike lasting a remarkable 74 days. His immense sacrifice was of huge significance, not only in shaping the Irish nation we enjoy today, but also inspiring many other revolutionary figures across the world, such as Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. This truly was one man's courageous stand against the mighty of an empire. In this video, referring to a plethora of chosen sources, particularly Dave Hannigan's book, I will attempt to depict MacSwiney's influence in the most fitting way possible to honour his sacrifice, which must never be forgotten. The year 1920 proved to be one of major significance in the life of Terence MacSwiney. However, he always had a good reputation around Cork, even prior to this crucial year. A well-respected Gaeilgeoir, MacSwiney would often be found cycling his bicycle throughout Cork, commuting between schools to teach various subjects. He excelled as an Irish teacher due to being a native speaker, which shows that protecting Irish identity and heritage was a constant in MacSwiney's life. MacSwiney took a keen interest in the Gaelic revival and Irish nationalism. After all, he was a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Even during his time as a teacher in London. After leaving school at 15, he worked as a warehouse clerk for Dwyer & Co., but he soon became utterly sick of office life and began studying medicine at nights after his shifts. In 1898, he suffered a breakdown. After graduating from UCC in Mental and Moral Science in 1907, MacSwiney worked for the Cork Municipal School of Commerce as a peripatetic teacher of business methods. MacSwiney's degree in Mental and Moral Science, paired with his natural linguistic ability and passion for the Irish language, was what made him such a revered teacher and distinguished Irish nationalist. Through building up such a rich reputation within Cork and the IRB, MacSwiney formed a close membership and friendship with Sinn Féin politician Tomás McCartan, who would go on to become the Lord Mayor of Cork on the 30th of January 1920, about 2 decades after the pair had met each other. MacSwiney was godfather to McCartan's son, Tomás Óg, which illustrates the brotherhood and friendship the duo shared. Their relationship was so close that Eilish McCartan used to joke that if MacSwiney were a girl, she'd have been jealous of the amount of time he spent with her husband. However, an event that would prove to drastically reshuffle MacSwiney's life and his wider circle in the worst way imaginable was only around the corner after McCartan's appointment. In the early hours of the 20th of March 1920, members of the Royal Irish Constabulary, their faces painted black, burst through the door of 40 Thomas Davis Street in Blackpool, Cork, and assassinated Tomás McCartan. Just 7 weeks after becoming Lord Mayor of Cork, McCartan's fate was to be shot in his own home. Befitting the municipal office he held, his body was to lie in state at the City Hall. There the people of Cork duly teamed in to pay respects to their fallen leader. When it was finally time to close the door to public mourners that Saturday evening, MacSwiney, or as McCartan would refer to him, Terry, stayed behind. He wanted to spend the night beside his coffin he had shouldered up the steps. At the North Cathedral the following day, MacSwiney again could not tear himself from the casket of his friend. Long after the church had emptied, he remained in a kneeling position, praying before the altar like somebody transfixed. This further emphasises the deep brotherhood that Terry and Tomás shared over 2 decades of knowing one another. On Monday, after the elongated funeral procession had wound its way through the grieving city on St. Finbarr's Cemetery in Glasheen, he steeled himself to deliver an oration by the graveside. His speech culminated in the line, No matter how many lose their lives in the cause of their duty, as did the Lord Mayor, another would be found to take the lead." These words from MacSwiney showed his dedication to the Republican cause and reaffirmed his already prominent nationalist status. It should be said that MacSwiney's words a day after the burial of his dear friend could be applied to any noble cause, and perhaps was a line that sparked the intrigue of anti-colonial revolutionaries such as Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela later down the line, who both admitted to being inspired by MacSwiney's story. Terry was always the obvious candidate to succeed his dear friend as Lord Mayor, and this was only amplified by his brief but memorable speech to the people of Cork, as the appointment of McCartan's successor was just 8 days later. MacSwiney was elected unopposed to replace his friend as Lord Mayor, nominated for the post by Liam de Rochta, seconded by Tig Barry, and supported by Sir John Scott, leader of the Unionist representatives. The announcement of his appointment caused uproarious cheering and celebrations in the city chambers and beyond. MacSwiney was officially appointed Lord Mayor on the 20th of March 1920. Just 11 days later, he received a letter from Dáil Éireann, written by the IRA of Intelligence and TD, Michael Collins, who congratulated him on his new position despite the circumstances of the election, referring to the untimely passing, of course, of Tomás McCartan. Collins also requested the enclosed note be delivered to the widow of the late Lord Mayor. It is from the Sinn Féin executive. Collins finally informed MacSwiney, and I quote, "I think we have information which may lead us to the discovery of the writer of the enclosed." Collins was referring to the identities of the RIC officers who murdered Tomás McCartan. This information was crucial for MacSwiney because the role of the Lord Mayor was not only the only void that needed to be filled following the death of McCartan. After the chain of office was firmly placed around his neck, MacSwiney succeeded his friend also as Commandant of the Cork No. 1 Brigade of the Irish Republican Army. To mark this, he stood and delivered an acceptance speech that was in equal parts a stirring tribute, political manifesto, and a militaristic call to arms. The circumstance of vacancy in the Lord Mayor governed inevitably by the filling of it, and I come here as a soldier, stepping into the breach, then administrator, to fill the post in our municipality. We see in the manner our late Lord Mayor was murdered an attempt to terrify us all. MacSwiney went on to reiterate the first duties of the public and ended his acceptance speech with the memorable line, "It is not those who can inflict the most, but they who can suffer most will conquer." Within a matter of months, those words would in so many ways become his own epitaph. I would like to say a word about your proceedings here. The position is that I am Lord Mayor of Cork and Chief Magistrate of this city, and I declare this court illegal, and those who take part in it are liable to arrest under the laws of the Irish Republic. James asked, "Mr. MacSwiney, you will be able to say that afterwards. Do you object to being tried by me as President or any other officers whose names you've heard?" MacSwiney replied, "Without wishing to be in any way personal to you, I wish to point out that this is an act of presumption to ask me that question. I say this whole proceeding is illegal." James interpreted that as a refusal to plead. Captain W.C. Gover, OBE, then began the case for prosecution by announcing his regret that the defendant had not recognised the validity of the court and wasn't going to professionally be represented in the proceedings. The 16th of August 1920 marked MacSwiney's prison sentence as he was confined to Brixton Prison in London. At 3 o'clock the next morning, MacSwiney was taken from his cell. He was driven under heavily armed guard through the streets of a still sleeping city to Custom House Quay. There was a British naval sloop was waiting to bring him away. As soon as he walked onto the gangplank, his legs suddenly unsteady now from 4.5 days without food. The Lord Mayor departed his hometown for the final time. What good is it to live a long life when we meant that life so little? Indeed, a long life does not always benefit us, but on the contrary, frequently adds to our guilt. Would that in this world we had lived throughout one single day. Many count up the years they have spent in religion, but find their lives made little holier. It is so terrifying to die. It is nevertheless possible that to live longer is more dangerous. Blessed is he who keeps the moment of death ever before his eyes and prepares for it every day. A reading from Thomas A. Campus' The Imitation of Christ, a book MacSwiney had owned for his entire life as a devout Christian. Father Dominic would recite the Irish language edition to him now, MacSwiney, for the majority of his 74 days on hunger strike. MacSwiney was a man who likely subtly knew was facing the end of his tenure on this earth by embarking on such a mission, could make peace with knowing he had achieved so much in his short 41 years. If this was to be the end for him, it would spark resurgence and life into the Irish Republic, and as young Kevin Barry said before laying down his life for Ireland, "It's nothing to give my life for Ireland. I'm not the first, and maybe I won't be the last." What's my life compared to the cause? MacSwiney was now willing to give his life for Ireland, even after all he had give. A Gaeilgeoir, a member of the Irish Volunteers since its inception in 1913, one of the main organisers of the Cork Easter Rising 1916, despite its failure. But no doubt he had more than made up for that failure with his role and impact in the War of Independence as Chief Commandant of the 1st Cork IRA and Lord Mayor. Now, the man was prepared to pay the ultimate sacrifice. In Dublin, on the 17th of September, day 36 of his hunger strike, he was on the minds of his colleagues when the members of Dáil Éireann came together for the first time since the hunger strike had begun. J. Walsh of Cork City proposed, and Pádraig O'Mulla of Connemara seconded a resolution that was unanimously passed before an order was given to immediately send a copy to Brixton Prison. The wording read, "Dáil Éireann, assembled in full session in Dublin, records its appreciation for its loyalty and devotion of the Deputy of Mid-Cork and the Chief in its appreciation for its loyalty and devotion and Chief Magistrate of Cork City. To him and the sufferers in Cork Jail, it sends on its behalf the people of Ireland sympathy and admiration. In the assurance that duly elected representatives of the people of Ireland are confident that all civilised nations in the world will join." That day, MacSwiney had told the press that he had witnessed a serious collapse during the afternoon and described him as very low that evening. However, in his update for the office, Dr. Griffiths described him as unchanged, apart from the gradual day-to-day deterioration that was a result of not being without food for so long. In his official daily communique about the mayor to the Home Office for the next evening, 18th of September, day 37, Dr. Griffiths wrote that he had found him sitting up in his bed being washed. He seems to be able to take a helpful part in the proceeding himself. The nurse informed me last night that he was talking a good deal to his friends, and to his friends reading the newspaper. Obviously, this painted a very different picture of the scene outlined by his family, who described him as weak but still conscious, although somewhat refreshed by 2 uninterrupted hours of sleep. Stark contrast between the two reports took an added significance 48 hours later, when a remarkably similar report to that of Dr. Griffiths was printed for the Evening News of London. However, the report failed to cover intimate details such as his temperature, which was 97, and his pulse, which was 78. It described the impatient as on the way back rather than on the way out. In the afternoon, he was able to sit up in bed and be washed, wrote the Evening News. He seemed to have sufficient strength to assist in the procedure. He was able to talk a good deal and read newspapers with interest. This portrait of the prisoner as almost hale and hearty soul was far removed from the reality of a skeletal man ebbing away in the prostrate position on what looking like becoming his deathbed. Predictably, the image of him sitting up reading the newspaper coverage of his own demise angered those who had spent so many days in vigil, watching him struggle to summon the energy to articulate even the shortest of sentences. Not to mention their own reaction to throwaway remarks in the article claiming that MacSwiney, like some uncooperative witness, was well but sulky and disinclined to answer questions. It was clear that the English press were trying to paint a picture of MacSwiney being in a normal, spriteful state, so that foreign opinion in the likes of America, France and the UK's wider allies would not go against the British Empire, seeing them in a bad light and gaining sympathy for the Irish cause in turn. This attempt at painting a picture to the rest of the world was most certainly not effective. MacSwiney's remarkable hunger strike lasted about 74 days, the equivalent of about 2.5 months. Understandably, his last days made for unimaginable suffering. On the 22nd of October, day 71, during a lengthy discussion between Dr. Griffiths and his wife Muriel, she asked whether it would be better if only one person from the family went in at a time. Dr. Griffiths responded by saying it was the nurses who kept him away from the prisoner. Eventually he told her that she could go in whenever the nurse saw fit to allow her, and could wait outside the door of the room at all other times. However, this proposed solution meant the rest of the family being excluded completely. "I cannot be here always, and what I will do when I cannot be here," protested Muriel. Muriel alleged that the doctor and his colleagues must be doing things to the patient that the family would be ashamed to see. Dr. Griffiths eventually agreed that she could nominate a family member to attend when Muriel was unavailable, with nurse's permission. At this point she went upstairs and had it out with the nurse on duty. "What harm have I done since being here with my husband?" asked Muriel. "None," replied the nurse. "You do not interfere with me. You have never interfered with me when I was feeding him. But I know you are against it, and it makes me nervous." Although Father Dominic and his brother Sean MacSwiney were allowed to remain in the prison overnight, the access to the mayor the family had remained for over 2 months was now placed under severe punitive restrictions. Some of them would never see him alive ever again. As W.B. Yeats went public on the New Statesman magazine with one of his most oft-quoted poems, Easter 1916, premature reports of MacSwiney's imminent death continued to whirl around London as the hunger striker began the improbable 72nd day of his fast. MacSwiney's hunger strike was now starting to get some international traction also. A French newspaper published a photo of the emaciated face of MacSwiney under the heading "The Lord Mayor of Cork," 2 days before his death. It is evident throughout reading, in between the lines of this heading, that the French outlet was sympathising with MacSwiney, recognising his proper status as Lord Mayor of rebel Cork. This further emphasises the monumental influence of MacSwiney's sacrifice, not only for the Republican cause back home in Ireland, but now on the international stage also. This was a huge triumph for the Irish Republic. On the 25th of October 1920, day 74 of the gut-wrenching, albeit inevitable news had come to fruition, as MacSwiney passed away due to heart failure at about 5:30 a.m. that morning. Without delay, a delegation from Cork Corporation and Harbour Road travelled to London to accompany their Lord Mayor home. After the Requiem Mass in London and Dublin had taken place, as they had made the short journey back across the pond, they were met with a colossal crowd of grieving Corkonians in Cove, as the crowd watched his remains arrive aboard the Rathmore. MacSwiney eventually was buried next to his lifelong brother Tomás McCurtain in St Finbarr's Cemetery. The remains lay in state in Cork City Hall for a night before being conveyed to yesterday to the Cathedral of St Mary and St Anne, where another Requiem Mass was celebrated. Sinn Féin TD Arthur Griffith delivered a graveside speech and said that the deceased had, quote, endured all that the power of England could inflict upon him, and in enduring, triumphed over that power. His body lies here, his soul goes marching on all through the ages. He is not dead, he is living forever in the hearts and conscience of mankind. Owing to ill health, caused by the ordeal and stress of caring for her husband in the last weeks, Muriel was unable to attend the London ceremony, nor did she travel to Ireland. A message was written in Irish on MacSwiney's coffin that translated to "Murdered by the Foreigner" in Brixton Prison, London, England, on October 25th, 1920, the 4th year of the Irish Republic. God have mercy on his soul. Whether the epitaph was in Irish to represent MacSwiney's love for Gaeilge or to make the English officers unaware of its meaning is unclear. The likelihood is a bit of both. The world paid their tributes to MacSwiney, also as his death brought Cork to a standstill. Le Radical states that, whatever one of MacSwiney's act from a political point of view, there is no one with a heart must bow before such a profession of a patriotic faith, such a heroism of sacrifice. Nations like the USA, particularly those in areas like Boston and New York, with vast levels of Irish diaspora in the post-famine society, protested on the streets of their cities for MacSwiney. Some referred to the British Empire as the Brutish Empire, following the British government's woeful mismanagement of Republican hunger strikers. Of course, this also included the likes of Michael Fitzgerald and Joseph Murphy, who died at similar stages to their Lord Mayor and Commandant in Cork Jail. On October 31st, 1920, 40,000 people filled into the Polo Grounds, a baseball field that was New York's largest open-air stadium, to hear Eamon de Valera commemorate the life of MacSwiney. An estimated 10,000 more were stranded outside as the Irish community gathered to mourn his passing, carrying tricolours and a collective wish to pay tribute to his sacrifice. De Valera famously said to the soaring crowd, Terence MacSwiney did not die to put spirit into his own people. He knew that they had spirit, that they were willing to make sacrifices as he did. In other lands, patriots had to teach other people the spirit of sacrifice by such an example. But MacSwiney knew that his people had spirit. We are not complaining at MacSwiney's death. He did as much for American principles as he did for Irish principles. This point was echoed by Marcus Garvey. Hundreds and thousands of Irishmen have died as martyrs to the cause of Irish freedom, said the leader of the United Negro Improvement Association. They compelled the attention of the world, and I believe the death of MacSwiney did more for the freedom of Ireland today than probably anything they did 500 years prior to his death. Protests for MacSwiney were rife in the US and attended by a wide plethora in various cities. Chicago with an estimated 50,000 and Boston with 30,000 estimated from eyewitness accounts. Australian MP for Melbourne, suburb of Richmond, Hugh Mahon, was the most strident voice in that side of the world, condemning the British government for their role in MacSwiney's death. Never in Russia under the worst ruler of the Tsars had there been such an infamous murder as that of the late Alderman MacSwiney. Mahon, who was an advocate for an independent Australian republic. The Australian-Irish diaspora unveiled a pilgrimage grave within 2 years of Terence and his father, John MacSwiney, who had emigrated to Australia when Terence and his two sisters were very young. The plaque of this was once again Ascoilia. It translated to, in memory of John MacSwiney, born in Ireland and in Melbourne on 19th October 1895 at the age of 59. May God have mercy on his soul. And also in memory of his son Terence MacSwiney, Lord Mayor of County Cork and leader of the Irish Republican Army, who died for the sake of the Republic in Brixton Prison on the 25th of October 1920. Ere Yeshde Gorev Ahanam Gillis, may his soul rest at God's right hand. The range and scope of the worldwide and nationwide influence was that over the coming decades. MacSwiney's sacrifice would be cited as influenced by Nelson Mandela against the apartheid regime in South Africa and Mahatma Gandhi's opposition to British colonialism in India. Bobby Sands would also proudly admit to being influenced by MacSwiney. For an example closer to home, amid his own fatal fast of 1981. MacSwiney's story would pop up wherever people were struggling to free themselves from an oppressor. Zviad Gamashkurdia, leader of the Georgian independence movement during the breakup of the Soviet Union in the 1980s, referred to Casement and MacSwiney as two heroes of the Georgians looked up to as they sought to gain freedom from Moscow. The worldwide impact of MacSwiney's sacrifice was undeniable and of huge aid to the Irish Republican cause. But ultimately, his legacy must be remembered for the bread and butter aspect to Irish men and women back home for the Republic. As his sister, Mary, and his dear wife, Muriel, attended the dichotomy, despite Muriel's ill condition, she found the resolve to deliver a performance of courage and wit in the witness box. The coroner, Dr. G.P. Wiat, shortly showing very little remorse for MacSwiney's death and his grieving and now widow wife, asking preposterous questions and providing remorseless responses. When Wiat asked for Terence's occupation, she diligently responded, an Irish volunteer. He has done nothing for years except work for his country, Ireland. Wyatt abruptly said, "I don't know how you can exactly describe that as an occupation." James Heman MacDonald, solicitor for the MacSwineys, asked his client Muriel a question. "Had the Lord Mayor any wish to die?" "No, none whatsoever." He told everyone he did not wish to die, but to be unconditionally released. MacDonald added, "Why, as far as you know, did he go on a hunger strike?" She answered, "Because they had no right to arrest him. He went on a hunger strike to protest his arrest. It was an offence against the laws of the Irish Republic." "You mean the arrest was an offence to the laws of the Irish Republic?" "Yes, certainly," finished Muriel with diligence. MacSwiney's sacrifice was ultimately about fulfilling his role in achieving the Irish Republic, which was declared on Easter Sunday in 1916. The influence of his sacrifice was undeniable, spearheading support for the cause of the Irish Republic on both a national and international level. British corruption in the forms of newspaper propaganda against MacSwiney and demeaning language in state trials, such as the dichotomy attempted by his most loving wife Muriel, is a testament to the guilt the British Empire authentically felt in enforcing a foreign regime on their colonies across the globe, as they had to resort to lies in an attempt to get the wider world on their side. Ironically, none of the colonies the Empire had pillaged and abused were more rebellious and courageous than their nearest neighbours in Ireland. And Terence MacSwiney's sacrifice in the name of the Irish Republic and liberty for the Irish people and those in need of our aid was one of the most significant acts of courage in Éireann's rich history of standing up to imperialism and colonialism from our nearest neighbours. MacSwiney's sacrifice, as well as all the men and women who gave up their lives for the cause of Irish sovereignty and liberation, must never be forgotten, and we should strive to create the Ireland that they envisioned, accommodating the Irish people and those in need of our aid to flourish in a Gaelic, free and youthfully exuberant society on our island which lies at the heart of the globe.